Welcome back to another episode of All the Answers to Question Period. I'm your host, David Crayden. Thanks for joining me again today. And I've got nothing to say at the moment, but I will. By the way, please like this broadcast, share it with your friends and family. I know you do, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And please subscribe if you haven't already, or if you have to resubscribe. Sometimes they unsubscribe you. But I got one announcement to make. I did a fantastic interview yesterday with Dr. Mark Trozy, and he is a fantastic source of information on COVID-19, the vaccinations, the mandates. He's on the verge of losing his license as a doctor in Ontario because he's been disciplined by the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons for spreading misinformation about COVID-19 and for handing out too many vaccine exemptions. Oh gosh, no. And he is fighting back mightily. But listen to the broadcast. It's on YouTube and it's also on Rumble. Go to the YouTube, stand on guard, and it will take you directly to Rumble to watch the whole broadcast. And we're just about to start question period here, but I just wanted to make that announcement before we got into it. Please watch the interview. It starts on YouTube, finishes on Rumble. Why did I do that? I don't usually do that. I don't like to do that. But sometimes the conversation and the subject matter is a bit too much for YouTube. And I don't want to tempt the fates. I want you to hear the interview. It's fantastic, but I don't want it to be upset in any way on the YouTube platform. So we moved it over to Rumble. Not something I like to do all the time, but we're going to see how it works this time. So please watch. We're on the question period any minute now. We're just finishing up the statements by the members.
Negotiate the first Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement, and when we form government, we'll negotiate a better one that doesn't include a carbon tax. Conservatives will always stand with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
The honourable member from Winnipeg North.
Yet they still voted against the Ukraine-Canada trade agreement. Mr. Speaker, we all remember the voting marathon last week. While the Conservative leader was whining and dining last week at a high-end fundraiser, his Conservative MPs here were served a cold, unhappy meal, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative leader may want Canadians only to order from off the value menu, but we know they deserve the whole Big Mac meal, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians have seen the mega politics value menu the Conservative leader has to offer, and they are not loving it, Mr. Speaker. But let us be serious. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know it would be a nightmare if that leader was to take charge, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
We've now had our tit for tat. I would like to hear the honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway, please. The honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway.
It was the night before Christmas, and all through the nation, Liberal numbers were tanking to the PM's frustration. The Speaker was restless with nightmares in bed while partisan videos danced through his head. As secular snowflakes made their Grinch-like descent, the Bloc says that Christmas is not a religious event. While the two Greens tried hard to make themselves heard, if co-leaders don't work, maybe try a third. When what to my wondering eyes should appear the Conservative leader bringing burgers, no beer, with his little red apple who votes through the nights. I knew in a moment this guy really bites. More rapid than reindeer, his chops he laid bare, revealing his taxpayer-funded oral health care. Public dental for all is the NDP's dream. We'd have pharmacare too if the grits weren't so mean. And one final wish for this season of light. Happy holidays to all, and to all a good bite.
love a good roast. L'honorable député Abitibi-Témiscamingue.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Oh.
Hastings, excusez-moi. Oh, Montarville. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Montarville. My apologies. Acadian Remembrance Day reminds us that in December of 1758, 3 ships packed with Acadian deportees were shipwrecked, killing.
So I wanted to remind you too, we're trying to get 15,000 subscribers by Christmas. We just went over 13,000 last night. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, or tell your family and friends. I'd really appreciate it. We're a small station, but we want to get larger, obviously, because I think we're doing an important job here. I hope we are. And please subscribe to the Rumble station as well, to the link you'll see, because we want to keep moving over there as well, because you never know when opportunities at YouTube will be diminished or perhaps erased. So it's important to always have the other option available. And I see the speaker is doing it again, going overtime, as he always loves to do. And if you have a chance tonight, I got to take these out of my ear for a second. All I can hear is Shelby Cramp Newman. If you have a chance, watch Redacted today. I'm on talking about the CBC, a subject we all love, an organization, an institution we all love to hate, actually, especially in its current form and with its current president. So I'm talking about that, and I hope you had a chance to watch Tucker Carlson on Redacted yesterday. Great show. It's a fantastic station, and I really come to know and like both of these hosts, Clayton and Natalie Morris. They're fantastic people, really good journalists, and I just wish them so much success in what they're doing, because they deserve it. They've worked hard for this, and it's such a pleasure to be part of the show once a week. And I wrote a column today in Human Events about Tucker Carlson, and it includes a lot of his appearance yesterday. So I encourage you to watch Redacted today, and I hope you saw it yesterday. My goodness, would you look at this? This guy's wearing a dinner jacket, a smoking jacket to the House of Commons. This is...
On behalf of the masses,
let's listen.
While Tories stepped back and sat on their hands. On the other side, we witness a continuing saga. Diefenbaker's party looks much more like MAGA. And I know they've been challenged by a leader's swinging door, but they think they struck gold with leader number 4. They gave him a makeover with etiquette classes, pumped up his chest, and took off his glasses. But no matter the issue they put on the docket, we still persevere with the dippers in our pocket.
This guy drunk? I have never seen, in all the years I've been watching.
Might seem like a rental, but because of this deal, Canadians got dental. In that glorious moment, I looked up and saw not a lick of support from the Bloc Québécois. But now it's time to return to our ridings and share with our friends the best Christmas tidings. And Mr. Speaker, I know that you will hate to see us go. If you think of us over Christmas, please don't send us a video.
Yeah. I've never seen a guy wear a smoking jacket to the House of Commons before. Quite something. At least there is some level of creativity left in the Liberal caucus. Somebody can write a poem. And better advice is for you to resign, Greg Fergus. Here we go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of debt for Canadian families. He said that the government was going to burden itself with even more debt so that Canadians don't have to do so themselves. But today we've just learned that now Canadian families spend more on interest on their debts than ever in our history, more than Americans spent during the 2008 crash. Will the Prime Minister finally inverse inflationist policy and taxes that have indebted Canadian families and that force them to give more to bankers and less for the groceries? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader continues to rise to speak about austerity, and we've just seen last week the true face of austerity from the Conservatives. They voted against helping dairy and egg producers and poultry farmers. They voted against funding for the Plains of Abraham. They voted against helping people from the Madeline Islands after Hurricane Fiona. Even worse, the member for Mégantic-l'Érable himself voted against funding for the railway plans for Lac Mégantic. Shame. Quebecers will never forget it.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Another
They'll never
example.
forget you either, Justin.
The Prime Minister hasn't even started building around Lac Mégantic. It's been 8 years. For 8 years, there have been announcements and announcements and announcements. Money is spent, but with no results. The same is true with regards to affordability. He spent $97 billion for housing affordability, but what it did was double the cost of housing. According to the Bank of Canada, the cost of housing is worse today than over the past 41 years. Will the Prime Minister finally inverse his inflationist policies that have doubled the cost of housing for Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, whilst the Conservative Party was partying last week, Canadians were served cold chicken McNuggets. $2 million, that was the cost of showing the true face of the Conservative Party of Canada. When it comes to supporting our veterans, how did they vote? Against. When it comes to supporting farmers, how did they vote? Against. When it comes to helping First Nations, how do they vote? Against. Mr. Speaker, we see who they truly are.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
For 8 years, this Prime Minister and NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost. He said that he was taking on all this debt so that Canadians wouldn't have to. Well, now we learn that Canadians are spending more on household debt interest than at any time in Canadian history, more than the American families were during the 2008 financial crisis that almost brought down the global economy. Will the Prime Minister reverse the inflationary high tax policies that have indebted Canadians and driven up their interest rates?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The audacity of this Conservative leader knows no bounds.
Right.
Just last week, he voted against a national school food program, and now he rises to talk about affordability.
That's right.
Let's be clear, this Conservative leader has no long-term vision for this country, with or without glasses. It takes more than a couple of bags of McDonald's to feed Canadians. That's why we're going to continue to step up and be there with investments for Canadians, while he talks about cuts and austerity and then goes and votes for cuts and austerity.
I think Justin had trouble combing his hair today.
Canadians can't even afford to feed themselves a couple of bags of McDonald's after 8 years of this Prime Minister taxing their food. Speaking of food, you know the only problem with his school food framework? It doesn't fund any food. Right. It funds politicians to talk with bureaucrats who talk with lobbyists about establishing a conversation towards consulting. It funds bureaucracy and not families. So speaking of one way he can make food more affordable for everyone, including our kids, will he pass Bill C-234, the common sense Conservative bill to take the tax off?
I've posted that petition of the non-confidence vote twice now, because every time I listen to Trudeau, I'm inspired to do so.
Exactly why, whatever his justifications, they have chosen to vote against initiatives there to help Canadians. Whether it's dental support for hundreds of thousands of kids that we've already brought in, with more support for seniors, they chose to vote against months ago, Mr. Speaker. They're continuing to step up and vote against the programs that matter. And while they seem not to care about climate change and want to sit back and watch the world burn, they're actually going to watch Canadians' food sources burn as well.
You're the one who's
The honourable leader of the
contributing to
opposition.
famine.
Is that prime minister that is burning a hole in the pockets of Canadians. We voted against his plan to quadruple the carbon tax, a tax on heat, gas, and groceries. Now, the prime minister, when I raised the cost of $100,000 for one farm in my riding, which will rise to $400,000, I said, will he call the family and find out and tell them how they're going to pay the tax? He said he would reach out to them. He would have a conversation about how they're going to pay a $400,000 carbon tax bill. Can he tell the House what he told that family about how they're going to come up with $400 grand in more taxes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the price on pollution is a key part of actually making things more affordable for the long term for Canadians by pushing and encouraging innovation. Indeed, our departments reached out to that farm family, to that very successful large mushroom farm in the member opposite's riding, to talk about the programs we have that can move off of their dependence on fossil fuels. We know there's work to do. We know there are investments to make, but that, Mr. Speaker, is how we fight climate change and build a better future. We have a plan to fight climate change. They have no plan because they don't even recognize that climate change is real.
What fool. That farmer that Pierre Polly had just referred to, I know who that is. I met that guy a couple of weeks ago.
Canada.
And Trudeau sidestepped the question. Of course, he has no intention of talking to him, communicating with him, contacting him. All he wants to do is just blather on about climate change, and farmers know it better than anybody else. He's a bona fide fool. Oops,
Can the
sorry.
Prime Minister commit to
I had the
changing
blockhead shut off there
our
for a minute. My
statutes
apologies.
so that hate speech in all of its forms is condemned? Mr. Speaker,
What the hell?
impact of the crisis and the war and
These
the
idiots want
violence
more
in
hate speech
the
laws?
Middle East can be felt throughout the world, especially in Canada. We are a strong country, strong through its diversity. We have people from all sorts of origins.
You don't want
who
diversity. You want everybody to agree
currently
with you.
stressed, scared, and angry. And that is exactly why we're working
You are
so
making
hard
people stressed,
to
scared, and
fight
angry,
against
Trudeau.
anti-Semitism, to fight against Islamophobia. We do everything we can to unite people in these difficult times so that people remember who we are and what our values are as Canadians.
I can't believe the Bloc is scurrying for more hate speech laws.
My call to
These
the Prime
people are
Minister is as
just
follows.
parasites. The Bloc is just
end
a bunch of
2023 with
parasites.
dignity.
Of course, half of the House of Commons are a
We could
bunch of
unanimously
parasites,
vote
but they're the
for
worst
peace
parasites.
in our streets and peace in general if we exclude religious-based hate crime from our society. Our streets will be safer and our conscience would be cleaner and more at peace. Can the Prime Minister commit to this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commend and thank the leader of the Bloc Québécois for his approach, for his desire to see a reduction in violence and division in our country. It is a desire that we share, and we will work on this and continue to work on this. We do recognize that this situation is delicate and difficult, especially when it comes to touching freedom of speech and freedom of religion. There is no simplistic solution to this. There is only hard work in order to unite people, and that is exactly what we are doing and what we'll continue to do.
I love this comment
Honourable Member for
from
New Westminster Burnaby.
Joseph Cheffy.
Mr.
Trudeau
Speaker, the
looks
number of
like he's
forced
going to have a
evictions
mental
reported in Quebec
breakdown.
continues to
Yes, he
rise
does.
at a worrying rate. Where are these people going to live? Over 1 million affordable housing units have been lost because of the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Guy, Peter Julian,
and just last week, the Conservatives voted to cut all funding for social and
member of
affordable
Parliament.
housing. The government says it wants to draw inspiration from wartime measures. Where was the war effort to combat the housing crisis over the past 8 years? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as we have said, We will use all tools at our disposal to make housing more affordable, and we'll do so with serious. Minister Fraser stated that we would go back to some wartime policy in order to create a catalogue of house designs that will allow us to accelerate the building of houses. This initiative is one of our innovative and bold ideas to modernize and accelerate the building of housing units in our country. This is another example. And the federal government can do this so that all Canadians have a roof over their heads. Before we continue, I would just like to remind the Right Honourable Prime Minister and all members that
Trudeau can't even say
of a member.
Something that simple without a script in front of him.
Or their writing.
That's how addle-brained he is. Scattered.
Live in fishing tents this winter because of lack of affordable homes. Just last week, the cut-and-gut Conservatives voted no to funding community housing, and the out-of-touch Liberals keep delaying critical funding to build affordable homes. The housing minister says he wants to draw inspiration from what Canada did in wartime to fix the housing crisis. A catalog is not going to cut it.
Up.
Part of that effort involves a national rent control initiative. Will the Prime Minister bring forward rent control to curb sky-high rent?
You are an outrage, Jenny Kwan, and the rest of your NDP caucus.
Mr. Speaker, we've shown a consistent willingness and desire to work with the provinces in areas of their jurisdiction in cooperative ways, and we are going to continue to, including on the issue of rent control. But there's not just one way to approach the housing crisis. It's something that we're doing on many fronts. So
boy, he is really scattered today.
We're building more apartments and co-ops by removing the GST on construction. We're eliminating barriers to get more homes built faster. By
read your script, Trudeau.
With cities. We're helping Canadians save up for a home with the first home savings account. I know there's more to do, and we're going to continue to work with all governments to take bold action to tackle housing.
Have you noticed how Trudeau never looks like his suits fit him?
Carlton Mushroom Farms, which faces a $400,000 carbon tax bill when the Prime Minister is done quadrupling the tax. When we spoke about this on November the 29th, he said that he looks forward to hearing the sustainable practices that the farm has put in place. Well, I can tell him I helped the farm actually get natural gas to its in order to power some of its operations, which is a lower emitting form of energy, but they're still going to face a massive tax increase. How will the Prime Minister advise the farm to pay it? By raising prices on Canadians or shutting down production?
Now, is Trudeau going to acknowledge that he promised to contact this farmer?
Mr. Speaker, for farms across this country that are shifting towards natural gas and lower emitting ways of heating and using their various machinery, that is something that we have put in place significant programs to help them with, and that is something we are going to continue to do, because it's part of our plan to both fight climate change and build a net zero economy of the future. We have a plan, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party of Canada has no plan to fight climate change. Indeed,
did you contact the farmer or not? You have no plan to go to the men's room.
Continuing to fight climate change and grow a strong economy.
Is he stoned again?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Prime Minister is backing off the things he's doing. Ironically, he's the one that brought in a temporary pause because his caucus was revolting regarding home heating oil. But my question was about the Madero's Carlton Mushroom Farm. He claims that he's got government programs to help farmers use more natural gas at the same time as he's quadrupling the tax on natural gas, which perhaps is the reason why Canada ranks 58th out of 64 when it comes to climate index performance. Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have a climate plan. He has a tax plan. So how will he advise the Madero's farm to pay the $400,000 bill he's sending them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Try again, Trudeau.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that climate change is a reality. We recognize that we need to help
That's not the question you have,
businesses across this country reduce their emissions and continue to prosper and grow in a world where the cost of inaction on climate change is increasing exponentially. That is why we have put in place programs to support farms, programs to support Canadians, indeed, to get off home heating oil, for example, and transform into heat pumps. These are things that we are doing as part of our plan. The Conservatives have no plan. That's right.
If your plan is heat pumps, they're going to explode in your face, boy.
Back to Canadian farms, Mr. Speaker. His plan raises a carbon tax on a greenhouse in my riding, which means that their produce is more expensive in the village of Manotick than a Mexican tomato is in the village of Manotick, sending a price signal for consumers to buy the tomato that had to be transported by truck and train, burning fossil fuels right across the continent. Why doesn't he axe the tax so that we can bring down the cost of farm production and bring home more clean, green Canadian produce?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the price on pollution is simple.
It's not pollution.
Pollution cost a bit more, but most Canadians get more money back than what they pay, with checks being sent to Canadians every few months. Big industry pays more than the regular Canadian because industry pollutes more, and as a result, they have an incentive to reduce their pollution. The ideologically driven MAGA Conservatives are calling for pollution to be free again and for the government to take those regular checks to Canadians away from them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Everything you just said is factually wrong. One, industry doesn't pay the carbon tax. They have a carbon tax carve-out. And as for him claiming that people get more back in rebates, the Carleton mushroom farms will pay $100,000 this year, rising to $400,000 over the carbon tax increase the Prime Minister proposes. And he's sending them tiny rebate checks to their household mailbox. Is he committing today that he's going to send a $400,000 rebate to this family farm?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Mr. Speaker, we are there to support families, but multi-million-dollar farms that are successful will be continued to encourage to look for ways to use their machinery and to heat their produce in ways that is lower emitting. That's what fighting climate change is all about. It's encouraging successful farms like the Medeiros family farm to continue to be successful, but to do so in ways that reduce their emissions. We know it cannot ever be free to pollute again, despite what the Conservative Party wants.
That's not pollution. What a lying SOB.
It is free for Mexican producers to, almost free. They have a tiny, tiny little carbon tax, not even comparable to the $400,000 tax bill that this Prime Minister is proposing. So what is he's saying is that there should be a price signal for Canadians to buy more expensive, polluting foreign food, while we, with the 5th biggest supply of arable land on planet Earth, shut our farmers down. How does that make any sense?
It doesn't make any sense. And we only produce 1.3% of the greenhouse gas emissions anyway.
In this country, farmers understand how important it is to protect the land for future generations, to pass on the bounty to their children and grandchildren of a great important job that feeds the rest of us. That is why farmers are so focused on the future, and that is why we are there to support them with a plan and investments that helps them reduce their emissions while they continue to put food on all our tables.
To put food on our table, yeah.
The Conservative Party refuses to even admit that there needs to be work done to reduce emissions. That is not the way to build a future. Not in Carleton, not anywhere.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister
He's got him on the ropes.
Actually,
keep hitting.
That farmers are working hard to protect the environment, which is why it's so strange that he wants to punish them with a tax that on one farm alone costs $100,000 that will rise to $400,000 for the crime of using the only source of energy that is available to that farm. So I'll ask the same question I've asked him now, half a dozen times. when he finally gets around to talking to Carleton Mushroom Farms, how will he advise them to pay their forthcoming $400,000 carbon tax bill? By raising prices on Canadians or by cutting back and bringing in more dirty foreign food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, 97% of farm fuel emissions are exempt from the price on pollution. The average farm across this country pays a little less than $1,000 on natural gas emissions through the price on pollution. So one can only imagine how much natural gas this successful mushroom farm must be using for their cost of the price on pollution to be that large. And we will happily work with them to switch towards a lower emitting approach to doing their business well and protecting future generations.
God, he is just so confused.
The Honourable Member from Montcalm. The government needed a positive announcement after its disastrous autumn
bloody
session.
halfwit.
And to please its centralist allies in the NDP, it chose dental care, a health service that actually already exists in Quebec. It chose an area under Quebec and provincial jurisdiction. It chose to interfere rather than support provinces in Quebec. Encroachment rather than collaboration. How can the Prime Minister justify making an announcement on dental care, a poor announcement on dental care, without having...
Where's that loser Jagmeet Singh lately? Hasn't been around. But you really trust the federal government to do anything right when it comes to health care? Medicare is a disaster in this country. Dental care is going to be a disaster. And somebody pointed out yesterday in the comment section, I thought this was beautiful. It's for dental care for people who don't have any teeth. But even if it was universal dental care, it would be a disaster. You'd be paying more in taxation for it than you would under a private plan. This is how ridiculous socialism is, especially as exported by Justin Trudeau and his incompetent Liberal government.
The government was ready to enter into an agreement to improve the plan. All the money transferred would be used for dental care. That was the plan. The Liberals knew this, but it's better for elections to elbow into Quebec's areas of jurisdiction than to simply transfer money. Quebec has the expertise, but the Liberals and the NDP chose Sun Life. Why did the Liberals choose a private company over RAMQ, Quebec's provincial healthcare system? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have great dialogue with Quebec on how we will help Quebecers receive the services that they deserve.
He's not doing much better in French today than he is in English. He's stammering,
with the government of
forgetting.
Quebec, not with the second official party, the official opposition party here in Ottawa.
The poor dumb goof can't even find his suit to fix. It's amazing. All that money and power.
Last night at committee, the hand-picked Liberal chair of this Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund was exposed as having used staff at the fund to round up $10 million for her project that had been deemed ineligible. And then she literally ran out of the committee, shutting off the cameras because she didn't want to answer any more questions. This NDP Liberal government failed to protect taxpayers from embezzlers and swindlers to the tune of $150 million. After 8 years, this Prime Minister isn't worth that cost. When will Canadians get back their missing millions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Innovation has already accepted the resignation of the CEO and chair. When allegations are made and issues arise, it's both appropriate and necessary for there to be a review of the matter. Those investigations and reviews are currently underway, and we look forward to the results of those investigations.
The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it's going to be more in-depth than the whitewash investigation that this Prime Minister and his minister put forward. They're under investigation by the Auditor General, 2 Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner investigations. Their board chair, his hand-picked chair, resigned in disgrace along with the CEO. The Prime Minister was handing out millions after his minister knew that his insiders had their hand in the cookie jar, taking $150 million taxpayer dollars. This Prime Minister isn't worth the cost after 8 years, and his NDP Liberal government couldn't be more out of touch. So who got rich and where did the missing millions go?
Answer. Yes, the RCMP can charge somebody.
Take yes for an answer. Independent officers of Parliament are investigating. A third-party review of the allegations is underway, and we're committed to ensuring organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to fighting climate change and drawing in investments from around the world,
How
we
do you
have a
get
plan.
climate
We have
change
a
into
focus
this?
on doing it in the right ways that's going to grow the economy and support Canadians. The Conservatives have no plan whatsoever. All they can do is try and play partisan political games.
Yeah, you've got
The
people
honourable member from
people
South Florida,
collecting
St.
money
Margaret's.
The Minister of Industry.
who have never
5 months
done
as
what they're
minister on this
supposed to
on this
produce
file.
to,
The Prime Minister's handpicked
to
chair
accept
of the
that
Green
money.
Slush
This
Fund admitted
government is
last
so
night that she tried
corrupt.
to get $2.2 million of taxpayer money funneled to the Visharian Center Vanity Project from the fund she chairs. Then she got the employees of the Slush Fund to get another $10 million for the Visharian Vanity Project from Liberal ministers. She took the money and ran. Visharian claimed that was being an entrepreneur.
No, it won't
We're
be
calling
Justin
it
Trudeau,
grifting.
Herc.
Why did the Prime Minister let his green slush fund chair abuse the taxpayer for personal gain?
Because that's what the Liberal government's all about, abusing the taxpayer.
The Minister has already addressed this question, and investigations are underway. But the work we are doing on fighting climate change is already cutting pollution while building a strong and competitive economy. While we
I just
work to
hate the way
advance our
he keeps
ambitious
calling
climate
carbon
action,
pollution.
The Conservative
The
Party has
pollution
no plan because
is
fighting
Justin
climate
Trudeau.
change simply doesn't matter to them. The Conservative leader is turning his back on future generations, on both environment and economy, by refusing to commit to Canada's targets, like his mentor Stephen Harper did when he withdrew from the Kyoto Accords.
Get out of them as soon as possible.
The honourable member from Mégantic-Clérable. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, Liberal friends are still lining their pockets. The $1 billion Green Slush Fund was confirmed by explosive testimony from a courageous whistleblower. Do you remember the Bye-Bye Boss advert from Little Quebec when someone leaves their job because they won the lottery? Well, that's what the former chair of the Green Fund, appointed by the Prime Minister, did. She fled, running from a committee with her pockets full to the brim with $10 million. Mr. Speaker.
Just like
When will the
Ukraine.
Prime
That's why
Minister
Trudeau loves
finally
Ukraine
get
so much.
Canadians'
Because
money
they're
back?
all a bunch of political corrupt.
The right honourable
They're
Prime
also
Minister.
politically corrupt in Ukraine.
Mr.
And
Speaker,
the politicians
Minister
are
has already addressed this
screening the
issue.
money.
There's an investigation underway.
They're skimming the
With
money
regards
in
to
Ukraine.
the
In
environment,
fact, you're
we
just
will go
taking it
beyond
wholesale.
the Harper government's objectives for 2030, and the most recent emission forecasts show that Canada is ready to reach its climate objectives for 2030.
Oh, here we go
An
again.
objective that is new, tabled by a government, and attainable. Our plan works.
Everything is distilled
The
to climate
Conservatives'
change in
plan
the
that
small
encourages
mind
emissions
of this
will only benefit large
completely
companies
out of
that,
touch Prime Minister.
repeat the same slogans as he does.
That's all you can
The
do is
honourable
repeat
member from
slogans.
Nunavut.
Adequate
What a-
housing
what
for
a
Indigenous
pathetic
peoples
individual.
have been neglected by Conservatives
Trudeau
and
is
Liberals.
pathetic.
Thanks.
And I can barely listen to these hypocritical dippers because they're the ones propping up this government and they pretend to be so outraged every day in question period of, oh, the Liberals aren't doing enough. And you are keeping this government in power. We have got to get rid of Justin Trudeau before the next election.
The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've demonstrated time and time again how committed we are to address housing gaps in Indigenous communities swiftly, effectively, and in equal partnership. Since 2016, we've supported the construction and renovation of over 30,000 homes in First Nations communities. We launched the $4 billion urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy, despite the Conservative Party voting to cut this essential funding. We will continue working with partners to co-develop and implement community-based housing solutions.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Edmonton families are making tough choices this winter. Put food on the table or buy Christmas presents for their kids. But who's stealing Christmas this year? Is it Scrooge? Is it the Grinch? No, it's the Liberal Conservative Corporate Coalition. They've let their grocery CEO
What?
friends jack up
You're the
prices
one in
to
the
make
coalition.
record profits while
What a
Canadians
fart.
turn to food banks
What a
for
clown.
Christmas
Get
dinner.
off the
Why
stage.
is the government okay with letting grocery CEOs ruin the holidays for Edmonton
And
families
maybe you
this
can
winter?
maybe you can find a tie too.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've actually
What a
taken
clown.
real actions to hold
One
grocery
clown to
CEOs
another.
account with more competition, because more competition means lower prices, more choice, and more innovative products and services for Canadians. Our affordability legislation will empower the Competition Bureau to hold grocers accountable and prioritize consumers' interests. The Fall Economic Statement proposes further amendments to the Competition Act to crack down on predatory pricing and better respond to anti-competitive mergers and more. We're ensuring Canadians have more competitive options, and we're limiting excess profits by corporations at the expense of Canadians.
The honourable member from Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian veterans have fought for our country and deserve all the respect in the world. Our government has invested over $11 billion in new services and supports for veterans
This
since
has got it's got to be a
2016, and will
softball.
always support
Oh,
those
yeah.
who have served to promote
What a
and
joke.
defend
Sean
Canadian
Casey,
values,
shut up.
both at
Your
home
government has
and
done
in
nothing for
so-called
veterans except
faraway foreign lands. Can the Prime
crap
Minister
on them.
update this House on what measures his government
That's
has
all
taken
your
to
government has
support our
done is
veterans?
crap on veterans.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
And tell them they can't pray in Remembrance
For
Day.
his advocacy and his leadership on the Veterans Affairs Committee. One of the very first things we did when we formed government was to reverse the damaging conservative
You're
cuts
welcome,
to
Think
veteran
Faster.
services.
I
Veterans
really enjoy
remember
commenting on these
when that
morons.
party cut programs, fired 1,000 veteran support staff.
I can't believe
and
Trudeau's been up so much
closed
today.
9 veterans'
He must be
offices
hopped
in
up
all an
today.
attempt to nickel and dime veterans to balance the budget for an election. And we saw last week that nothing has changed when the Conservative Party voted to cut funding for our armed forces, and even worse, they voted last week to cut support for homeless veterans. The Canadian veterans know they cannot trust this Conservative leader.
This is
The
the
honourable
government
leader of the
that's
opposition.
cutting national
Speaker, this
defense
is the
by
Prime Minister who said
10%.
veterans were asking for more than he could give. He sued them in court after he said he never would. He's caused the homelessness that he just talked about, and he spends the money on more bureaucracy instead of on our veterans. Now, he asked how much that the Carleton mushroom farms is spending on gas. He said they're spending too much. I have their bill records here, Mr. Speaker. In November alone, it was $11,866, prorated to what, $100,000 a year, which he wants to quadruple to $400,000 a year. Once again, should the farm raise prices on
You're lying.
consumers or cut production so polluting foreign farms get the business?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the average farm family, the average farm in Canada pays far less, around 1% of what that very successful farm is paying. Because the reality
How
is,
the hell would you know?
97%
You can't keep a fact in your head for more than 5 minutes.
from the price on pollution. That is why we are continuing to move
Just keep
forward with
repeating your
programs and
BS.
supports to
Price on
encourage
pollution.
farms
Price on
across the country,
pollution.
particularly
That's all
very
you can do is
successful
repeat
farms,
the
to look at
nonsense,
ways to
and you'll
reduce
hope
their
somebody will
emissions
start to
as
believe
they
it.
move forward
Not
into
going to
a net
happen,
zero
Justin
future.
boy.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So that's his attitude now. Remember,
What
we
an
call
arrogant
small businesses
SOB.
wealthy tax cheats. Now he accuses the Carleton mushroom farm of being too successful. Therefore, they need
Exactly.
to pay higher taxes.
Exactly.
He clearly has no idea
Too
about our food
successful.
supply chain because, of course, grains have to be dried, and the fuels for drying are now taxed. Barns have to be heated. Those barns, that heating, are now taxed. There's a common sense Conservative bill to axe the tax on those farmers to lower the price of the food. But if he doesn't believe that this tax costs farmers, will he sit down with the Madero's Carleton Mushroom Farm and inspect their bill personally?
Trudeau is lying when he says 97% of farm operations are exempt. It's a lie, and I can prove it.
to reduce their emissions, who are concerned about climate change, who want to preserve our land for future generations, who understand, unlike these MAGA conservatives, that there is no choice anymore between
conservatives.
protecting the
The hell does
environment
that mean,
and
you
growing the
half-wit?
economy. While the conservatives want to take us back to the Stone Age, we're
Oh,
going to
he's
continue
saying
to
it now.
invest in supporting farms, supporting businesses,
Who wants to take us
supporting
back to the
Canadians,
Stone
while
Age,
we
Justin?
reduce our pollution, reduce our emissions, and build a stronger future for everyone.
It's the liberal government that's taking us, literally taking us back to the Stone Age.
Targets, except for the 1 year when the Canadians were locked down. His own environment commissioner says that he will come nowhere near meeting his 2030 targets. And now Canada ranks 58th out of 64 on the Climate Performance Index. So his tax is not working. And nor does he seem to understand how food arrives. Food doesn't come from the grocery store, Mr. Speaker. The average farmer in Canada has to spend $150,000 on his carbon tax for barns and drying, and that all has to go to the consumers. Won't he pass our common sense bill to axe the tax on food?
And Trudeau had the gall to say it's $1,000 for the average farmer. What? Somebody was farming in his backyard?
8 years ago, Canada had no plan to reach even its very modest, the Harper government's even very modest environmental targets. We not only have surpassed the Harper targets, we put in place new ambitious targets that we are very much on track to meeting, Mr. Speaker.
What?
We have decreased our emissions
You're creating famine in this country.
than any other G7 country, and we will continue to lead the way on demonstrating that you cannot have a plan for the future of the economy if you don't have a plan to fight climate change. That's what we're doing. That's what they are not.
What a madman. He's totally crazy. He's totally crazy. He's creating impoverishment and famine.
On the facts, under the previous Conservative government, we actually reduced emissions while growing the economy. We did it through technology and not taxes. This Prime Minister, by the way, I said earlier that Canada ranked 58th out of 64. There's a new publication of the ranking, and Canada is now 62nd out of 67. In fact, we've fallen.
It's all a big farce.
The ranking. So, will
it's
the
all a
Prime
big game.
Finally get rid of his tax plan and come up with an environment plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are on track to surpass Harper government's 2030 target, and the latest emissions protection show Canada
We're on track
is
for disaster in this
our
country.
government's new, ambitious, and achievable 2030 climate goal. Our plan is working. We're seeing companies around the world invest in Canada. We were the third largest country in terms of foreign direct investment in the world earlier this year because people are noticing Canada's leadership on fighting against climate change. But that party continues to vote against measures to support our farmers, measures to invest in a cleaner economy, measures to protect Canadians and their economy from the challenges of the future. We will be there for Canadians.
It is all a bunch of useless, meaningless rhetoric.
There are two solitudes, even in the attitude towards asylum seekers. Quebec takes in half of Canada's asylum seekers,
here we got
we
the
don't
block.
hesitate. We offer services
all they
first
can
on our
talk
own
about is
dime,
two
and then ask the
solitudes.
federal government to reimburse the $460 million bill. People first.
Yeah, there are two solitudes in this country. There's common sense and there's liberal idiocy. Those are the two solitudes. But it is amazing to me how Trudeau can get away with repeating the same script, the same talking points, and they are meaningless. It is nothing but unsubstantiated rhetoric.
To help them learn French. The immigration system will continue to be reinforced and bring its benefits to Quebec and the country. Immigration is essential to help businesses and find the workers that they need. In order to grow our economy, we will always work very closely with the government of Quebec, whether it be on immigration, housing, or the economy.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Right, give me my next piece of the script.
Asylum seekers are the federal government's responsibility. And instead of repeating that it's not an ATM, the federal government has to stop treating Quebecers like its personal credit card. The entire bill for services to asylum seekers is being charged to it. Well, today the bill comes due. The Prime Minister has to pay his balance, and true to form, he's trying to get out of it. He doesn't like paying his debts. We know all about him. So we won't let this go. Will he take responsibility for asylum seekers and respect Quebecers and pay them back?
They're called illegals.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for years, we've sent hundreds of millions of dollars to Quebec to help with asylum seekers. We recognize how much Quebecers have shown generosity and been present for asylum seekers. And we will continue to be there to help because Canada
they're called
is
illegal
a welcoming
immigrants,
country,
so just
but also
illegals.
a country that has
Never
to
mind
make sure
asylum
everyone
seekers.
is well protected when they get here, even asylum seekers. We will continue to work with Quebec. We will continue to be there to support asylum seekers because that's the right thing to do.
The Honourable
That's the
Leader
right
of
thing
the
to do.
Opposition.
And you invited them all to Canada, didn't you?
After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing. According to the Bank of Canada,
He's not worth the price of a cup of coffee.
we have the worst affordability since 41 years. Rents have gone up, have doubled, rather, and now it costs more to rent one bedroom in a shared apartment than it did for the whole apartment when this Prime Minister took power. Evictions in Quebec have gone up by 132%. It's the main cause of homelessness. Will the Prime Minister finally reverse policies that favor bureaucracy and help with homelessness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Conservative leader said what he thinks by stating that the federal government should pull out of building affordable housing, but we're not going to follow that irresponsible advice. Maybe that's why
Which
last week
irresponsible
his
advice are
party
you going to follow?
voted
Well,
against funding.
you know why Trudeau's up so much today? This is the last time you're going to see his ugly mug until next January sometime. So this is why he's up on his feet so many times today, because he said, I got to look like I'm at least in question period once a month. I have to look busy once in a while. So that's why we've seen so much of his presence today.
Common. They don't exist. They don't exist. 8 years ago, they promised to spend $97 million on affordable housing. And we've seen rents doubled and mortgages. In Quebec, 132% increase in evictions is now the main cause of homelessness after 8 years of this Prime Minister. When will he recognize that increasing bureaucracy and inflation doesn't help with housing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, last week, the Conservative Party voted against 71,000 new apartment units. They voted against 15,000 affordable housing units. And their excuse now is that they don't exist yet, so we can vote against it. Come on. That's really a lack of understanding of the responsibility of a government to invest to create a better future, to solve problems. Mr. Speaker, he just wants to increase distress, whereas on this side of the House, we are going to stand up for Canadians in spite of the Conservatives who oppose all these measures. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Same thing he's done for 8 years. He spent $87 billion on housing affordability to double housing costs. We have fewer homes per capita than we did when he took office, the fewest homes of any country in the G7. He doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, doubled the needed down payment, to the point where the Bank of Canada reports this week that Canada has the worst housing affordability in 41 years. And Rent.ca reveals that it's now more expensive to rent one room in a shared apartment than it was 8 years ago to rent the entire apartment for oneself. Mr. Speaker, when will he realize that ballooning inflation and the bureaucracy doesn't build homes?
Well, of course it does.
Prime Minister.
The government can't do anything properly.
When will the leader of the official opposition understand that voting against the construction of 71,000 new homes through the apartment construction loan program is not going to help anyone? That voting against the construction of 12,000 new affordable homes through the Rapid Housing Initiative will not
Think faster. He will be a bit more tanned in January, though. Yeah.
In trying to shut down this house through a MAGA-inspired approach, while we
A MAGA-inspired
continue to stand
approach.
up
What a
for
stupid
Canadians
talking
and
point.
deliver on the
He can't
things they
even
need.
think of something
While
that makes
they
a
play
little bit of
partisan
sense.
games, we will continue to fight for Canadians.
So the question I have for you all, where do you think Trudeau is going to vacation this year? Is he going to see the Aga Khan again? Or is he going to go to a private resort in the Caribbean that none of us could afford this Christmas? Where do you think he's going to haul his carcass this year? Can the Prime Minister tell this House?
Millions of workers
Here
in the
comes
tourism
a nice
sector.
softball
The Right
question.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you
the
for that
member for Sudbury
question.
for her excellent question and her hard work.
Yes.
Last week,
What a
the
joke.
Conservative Party voted against
bad
programs
joke.
to support Canadians and turn their backs on the 2 million tourism sector workers. They voted against funding to support
Trudeau
tourism
knows
growth
all
in the
about
country.
the tourism sector because he
Workers
spends
in that
most
sector
of his
deserve
free
better.
time on
Unlike the
tour, going
Conservatives,
going
who
on
only
vacation.
support workers during their advertising campaigns on this side of the House, we will continue to support workers in the tourism sector.
Of course, the funny, every time he goes on vacation, he makes an ass of himself. No,
Jobs, no money. How mortgage rates have pushed one Toronto father to the brink. And I quote, 2 years into our mortgage, their bi-weekly payments have reached $2,268, now paying more than $5,000 a month to live in a 900 square foot townhouse,
Wow.
and 3,500 of that goes to interest. Mr. Speaker, all of his spending
Incredible.
programs have doubled the cost of housing, and according to Bank of Nova Scotia, have boosted interest rates another 2%. Will he realize the damage he's doing in causing Canadians unsupportable and sustainable mortgage?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize the challenges Canadians are facing, and on this side of the House, we've chosen to invest to support them, to create new affordable housing, to create new apartments. But, Mr. Speaker, as much as the Leader of the Opposition loves to rise in this House to talk about Canadians and suffering, he will not rise in this House to support solutions to Canadians' challenges.
maybe you should present something that's a solution.
71,000 new
Because you
rental
can't
homes
do that.
through the apartment construction loan program. He rose in this House to vote against 12,000 new affordable homes through the Rapid.
Yeah, I love this comment from Think Faster. He's single now. Trudeau will go somewhere expensive. If nothing he does is not expensive. Problem is, he's costing us money as well.
Housing to double the cost of housing. He thinks that if he's expensive, he's excused for his failures. Mr. Speaker,
He's
failing is bad.
Pierre's thinking like
Failing
we are.
expensively
He's expensive.
is even worse. Our common sense plan would require cities permit 15% more housing as a condition of getting their financing, give them bonuses if they beat the target, link the dollars they get for transit to requirements for apartments around them, and sell off 6,000 federal buildings and thousands of acres of federal land to build, build, build. Why can't he get behind that common sense plan?
Because he has no common sense. We all know that.
Mr. Speaker, inflation has gone up, interest rates have gone up, food prices have gone up, energy prices have gone up, all linked to the ongoing war that Russia is waging.
He got Ukraine in.
We recognize that.
It's all because of Ukraine.
We are acting not just to bring down prices here at home, but to stand with Ukraine in our fight against Russia. Unfortunately, the leader of the official opposition, who referred to
He had to get Ukraine in here.
faraway land, refuses to stand up to deliver for Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the
Go to
House,
hell
we
with
will
your
always be there
Ukraine.
for Ukraine.
Not much longer you won't, you bloody halfwit. It's gone. It's over. And he probably knows at least that much.
He's there for himself. When conservatives demanded
Most corrupt country in Europe.
weapons before Putin's invasion, when they most needed them, he said no. When conservatives kicked Putin out of the G8 and made it the G7, he said no. And what he said yes to giving Putin an exported, big, powerful turbine to pump his gas and fill his war chest and export detonators used for Russian mines that blow up Ukrainians, Mr. Speaker. That's not there for Ukrainians. We will stand for Ukrainians and for Canadians.
I'm not even going to comment on that because I am sick to death of giving money to Ukraine, and I'm sick to hearing the conservatives support it. And you're wrong. He's wrong about that. Not a cent more for those corrupt politicians and oligarchs in Ukraine. The war is over. It's a bottomless pit. Zelensky will be fleeing the country soon to his private villa. And he's got several of them.
Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to find ourselves in an argument about which side of the House is more supportive of Ukraine, because one of the
that's a pretty pathetic argument.
On the world stage these past difficult 2 years is that we've said there is no debate around support in Ukraine in Canada like there is in other countries where MAGA-inspired far-right movements are undermining supports for Ukraine. The Conservative Party of Canada has an opportunity to reverse its position in opposing the Ukraine free trade deal that Zelensky is asking for.
And now it all comes down to this. Who's more in favor of goddamn Ukraine? This is just nonsense. Is there, good. Try supporting Canada, Wade Schaefer says. So I'm sick to death of who supports Ukraine more. Who supports Canadians?
The honourable member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been clear on where we stand on the war in Ukraine. We know that Ukrainians...
I'm going to ask colleagues, please. This member is very far away from the speaker. The speaker would like to hear the member. The honourable member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been clear on where we stand on the war in Ukraine. We understand that Ukrainians are not just fighting for their own freedom and survival, but that they're also fighting for us, and that we need to be fighting for them.
Non seulement que moi j'ai des difficultés à entendre.
Not only am I having trouble hearing the honourable member for Etobicoke Centre when he's asking his question, I see that there are members on the other side of the House who are having trouble hearing the question. I invite the member for Etobicoke Centre to restart their question.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been clear as to where we stand on the war in Ukraine. We understand that the Ukrainian people are not just fighting for their own freedom and survival, but that they're also fighting for us, and that we need to be fighting for them.
What a joke. They're fighting, the oligarchs and the corrupt politicians are fighting for their own money that they're looting. They're money laundering. Yes, all of you have recognized that. Ukraine is a bottomless pit of money laundering. That's all that's going on.
The honourable member from Etobicoke Centre from the top, please.
That's all they can talk about in House of Commons is Ukraine and climate change.
We understand that the Ukrainian people are not only fighting for their own freedom and survival, but they're also fighting for us.
We have to hear this a third time?
Fighting for them. It is also clear where conservative MPs stand. Their leader has never advocated for military, financial, or humanitarian support for Ukraine. They voted against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. And yesterday, the leader of the Conservative Party dismissively referred to Ukraine as a faraway foreign land. Under this leader,
what the hell do you think it is? Is it next door? What a hapless idiot. What a hapless idiot. You get up and all you can hold forth about is giving more billions to Ukraine. so they can continue to die.
Colleagues,
It's got nothing to do with defending freedom or democracy. This is not a democratic country. Zelensky is a dictator. Shut up, Fergus. You have no moral authority to tell anybody to stop heckling. Heckle you.
Please have the way to identify yourselves who are heckling and not leaning back to try to cover your face. From
Fergus, you're a joke. You should resign. You're a partisan idiot.
So I'm going to ask the honorable members to please allow the member from Etobicoke Centre so that we all can get back to the business of doing the people's work. The honorable member from Etobicoke Centre, I regret from the top.
Mr. Speaker, our government has
4
been clear
times
where we
this
stand on
moron
war in
is up
Ukraine.
there
We know
spouting
that
off
people
about
are not
Ukraine.
only fighting for their own freedom and survival, but that they're also fighting for us and that we need to be fighting for them. It is also clear now where conservative MPs stand. Their leaders never advocated for more military, financial, humanitarian support for Ukraine. They voted against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, and yesterday, the leader of the Conservative
This is
Party referred
pitiful,
explicitly to Ukraine
pathetic.
as a far-away foreign land. Under this leader, the Conservative Party has abandoned Ukraine. Could the Prime Minister please reassure Canadians that this government will stand with the Ukrainian
Yeah,
people?
set him up for another stupid answer about Ukraine. How stupid do they think people are? The war is over, you stupid moron. The war is over.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You have destroyed our military in the process. You've given away all our tanks. They've all been destroyed on the battlefield. You are an idiot.
The Conservative Party yet again showed Ukrainians and all Canadians who they really are. When it came time to support military aid to Ukraine, they voted against. When it came time to support Operation Unifier, they voted against. When it came to the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, twice they voted against.
A free trade agreement with a country that's on the verge of extinction. That is so stupid. The government is about to fall, and you're worried about a free trade agreement that will have no validity in a month. This is so hopelessly stupid. It is so incredibly unreasonable. It is so beyond anyone's comprehension how people can be this stupid. But that's how dumb the Liberal government is. And unfortunately, the Conservatives are sharing that idiocy with them. That somehow there's going to be a government led by Zelensky in Ukraine in 4 weeks. I don't think so. And the clown has still got his hand out everywhere he goes, looking for more money, so he can retire.
The living crisis. The Liberals are forcing them to pay back the Canada Emergency Business Account loan within the next few weeks, or risk losing up to $20,000. And while the Liberals put small businesses in jeopardy, they're handing out $21.6 billion to their rich consultant friends. Reducing this out-of-control outsourcing by just 4% more would cover the cost of extending the CEBA. So instead of choosing rich CEOs and highly paid consultants, will the Liberals support small businesses by extending the CEBA by just 1 year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, during the pandemic, we stepped up with unprecedented supports for small businesses. We were there to support them. We were there to invest in them. We were there to support Canadian workers.
You were there to have lockdowns. You were there to have mandates that unfairly victimize people. You were there to shut down the economy. You were there to see small businesses close left and right. Look at any main street in Canada. That's the legacy of the pandemic for you, Justin Trudeau. You destroyed the economy because you're listening to your masters at the World Economic Forum, who want the Canadian economy destroyed.
Be there to support people, but pandemic supports needed to end.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, despite climate negotiations being captured by fossil fuel
This guy.
interests, countries just agreed at COP28 to transition away from fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's
Yet
really
back
going to
at
happen,
home,
Mike.
This government continues to do the opposite, wasting over $1,200 on behalf of each and every Canadian taxpayer to expand the TMX pipeline and increasing oil production to record levels. Why is
Oh
it
no,
this
they're not doing
PM
enough.
can't find the money
They're not doing enough to destroy the economy, Mike.
poverty for people with disabilities, but that's tens of
You
billions
want to
of dollars
freeze some
for a
more in the
leaky
winter.
pipeline.
Oh. You really think we should be shutting off all the lights, eh?
Mr. Speaker, Canada demonstrated yet again its leadership on the world stage with ambitious leadership in putting a cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector, on recognizing that we do need to get to a net zero economy and we need to support all our industries, including our
We don't
energy
need to do
industry,
any of
in
that.
moving towards
That's how
that.
stupid
We
you
will be
are,
there
Trudeau.
to support workers in the energy industry as we focus on decarbonization. We will be there to support businesses across this country as they shift to lower emitting technologies. We understand the process it takes. We will accompany Canadians every step of the way, and we will get to net zero.
Here, here.
And that brings to an end question period.
Well, how
I see
delightful.
rising on a point of order is the Honourable Government House Leader.
Sure. Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions among the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you would find unanimous consent to adopt the following motion. That the motion standing on the order paper in the name of the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons related to the appointment of Eric Jantz as clerk.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, thanks for watching today, folks. And it's always an education, isn't it? To see how incredibly moronic the government can be. How Justin Trudeau is so empty-headed. He keeps reading from a script, saying the same things over and over again that are meaningless, empty rhetoric, because he hasn't got a clue in hell what he's talking about. He has no sense of what average Canadians have to go through. He has no sense of what the cost of living is. Then he doesn't want to. He lives in his bubble. He lives in his own little privileged elite world. He's going to go off on Christmas vacation again, have a good time, do his usual crap, the stuff that drives him, and he's going to come back in January unchanged and say the same nonsense, bringing this country closer to the precipice of catastrophe. We are headed towards disaster under Justin Trudeau, and we got to keep fighting, and we have to resolve to resist. I keep saying it, but we need to do that. Thanks for watching today. This has been a pretty good session, but as I said, the only reason you saw Justin Trudeau on his feet so much is because you're not going to see him for about 6 more weeks, if at all. And you listen to him go on about, oh, probably interfered with my Christmas vacation. I'm still here. What a whining excuse for a political leader. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. And I encourage you to, as I said, watch Redacted this afternoon and watch my interview with Dr. Mark Trozzi, which begins on YouTube and finishes on Rumble. Hope you have a chance to see it. It was a great interview, and this is a courageous doctor. This is a Canadian hero who's fighting all of the nonsense that Justin Trudeau has done in the name of science, but it's actually just politics, pure and simple.